I need to talk about what happened at WKRL in the fall of 2019. I've tried writing this down 3 times before. Twice I deleted it. Once I got halfway through and had to pull over on the side of the highway because my hands were shaking too badly to drive. But people deserve to know. Specifically, Darren's family deserves to know what actually happened during those last few weeks, because the official report is incomplete. Not wrong, exactly. Just incomplete in a way that amounts to a lie. I'll start with what WKRL was. It was a low-power AM station out of Carriston, Ohio. If you've never heard of Carriston, that's because there's no real reason you would have. It's one of those towns that exists in the space between other towns. About 40 minutes southeast of Dayton, population maybe 3,000 on a generous census day. The kind of place that has a hardware store, 2 churches, a Family Dollar, and a radio station that nobody outside a 20-mile radius could pick up even under perfect atmospheric conditions. I got the overnight shift in August of 2019, 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. I was 26, 3 years out of a communications degree that had done exactly nothing for me, and this was the first job I'd found that was even tangentially related to broadcasting. The pay was barely above minimum wage. The studio was in a converted ranch house on the edge of town next to a soybean field that seemed to stretch forever in every direction. During the day, WKRL ran local news, high school sports, and agricultural reports. At night, it was just me, a preloaded automation system, and the FCC mandated requirement that a licensed operator be present. My job, in theory, was to monitor the broadcast, read the hourly station identification, and handle any technical issues. In practice, I sat in a dim control room, listened to the same rotation of classic rock and easy listening that the automation system cycled through, and tried to stay awake. There was no call-in line for the overnight. There were no listeners. The station manager, Pete Voorhees, had been frank about that during my interview. "Nobody's listening at 2 in the morning, Marcus," he told me. "But the FCC says someone's gotta be there. So someone's gotta be there." There were 2 other people I need to mention. The first is Darren Keach. He was the evening host, 6 to 11 p.m. He usually stayed an hour or so past his shift to help me get settled, shoot the shit, share whatever leftovers his wife had sent him in with. He was 43, heavyset, had a voice like warm gravel, and was the closest thing to a mentor I'd ever had in any job. The second is Lisa Pruitt, the station's part-time engineer and afternoon host. She came in maybe twice a week for the overnight, usually when there was equipment acting up or when Pete wanted someone to check the transmitter readings. She was quiet, competent, a decade older than me, and had a way of looking at equipment like she was listening to it think. Now, the signal. It started on September 14th, a Saturday night. I remember because I'd been planning to watch a college football game on my phone during the shift, and I was annoyed that the station's Wi-Fi had gone out again. The automation was running normally. I could see the playlist scrolling on the screen, could hear the music going out over the air through the monitor speaker. But underneath it, barely perceptible, there was something else. A tone. Not quite a hum. More like a sustained note, very low, sitting just beneath the threshold of the broadcast audio. I thought it was equipment noise at first. Old stations like WKRL have all kinds of ground loop issues, interference from fluorescent lights, that kind of thing. I checked the usual suspects, turned off the overhead light, unplugged the mini fridge in the corner that sometimes caused a buzz in the board. The tone persisted. It wasn't coming through the board at all, I realized. It was coming through the monitor speaker, the one that played back what was actually going out over the air, which meant it was either in the signal chain somewhere between the board and the transmitter, or it was something the transmitter was picking up and rebroadcasting. I made a note in the log. Low-frequency tone present in broadcast monitor, not originating from board, intermittent, will flag for Lisa. Then I put on my headphones, turned up a podcast, and forgot about it. The tone was there again Sunday night. And Monday. By Wednesday, I'd stopped noticing it. That's how it works with constant low-level sounds. Your brain just edits them out. I mentioned it to Lisa when she came in on Thursday. She frowned, listened to the monitor for a minute, said she could barely hear it, and told me she'd check the transmitter connections on Saturday. Probably a ground issue at the tower, she said, or someone's electric fence is bleeding in. There were farms everywhere around us. It wasn't an unreasonable explanation. But here's the thing I didn't mention to Lisa, because I wasn't sure it was real, and I didn't want to sound crazy. On Tuesday night, or Wednesday morning technically, around 3 a.m., I've been talking to myself. Not unusual. Alone for 7 hours in a dim room, everyone talks to themselves eventually. I'd been complaining out loud about the coffee maker, which had stopped heating properly. Piece of shit can't even get the water hot anymore, I'd said, to nobody, and the tone had shifted, just slightly, just for a moment. It rose in pitch, maybe a half step, maybe less, and then settled back, like it had reacted. I told myself it was a coincidence, a fluctuation in whatever electrical interference was causing it. I told myself that so confidently that I believed it for almost a week. The following Tuesday, September 24th, Darren stayed late, like he often did. We were in the control room together, the broadcast running on automation, the monitor speaker playing softly in the background. The tone was there, as it had been every night. Darren was telling me about his daughter's college applications, the stress it was putting on his wife, how he was worried about paying for it. Normal conversation. The kind of thing you say to a coworker at 11:30 at night when you're both too tired to be guarded. I just don't know if we can swing it, he said. State school, sure. But she's got her heart set on Case Western, and I mean, look at me. I'm a night shift DJ in a town nobody's heard of. I'm not exactly sitting on a college fund. I said something sympathetic, something generic about scholarships and financial aid. And then the tone changed. We both heard it. There was no mistaking it this time. It didn't just shift in pitch. It modulated. It pulsed 3 times. 3 distinct pulses, each one slightly higher than the last, like someone pressing keys on a keyboard. Darren stopped mid-sentence. He looked at the monitor speaker. He looked at me. What was that? The tone, I said. It's been doing that for a couple weeks. I mentioned it to Lisa. That's not just a tone, Marcus. That sounded like it responded to something. It does that sometimes, I said. Fluctuates. Lisa thinks it's interference from a nearby farm. He stared at the speaker for a long time. The tone had settled back to its baseline drone. Darren was quiet for a while, and then he said, "Huh," and changed the subject to something else. But he didn't stay much longer that night. Left around midnight, which was early for him. The next evening, when he came in for his shift, he found me in the break room and closed the door. He had a look on his face that I'd later come to recognize as the beginning of something. Not fear exactly, but a heightened alertness. Like a dog that's heard a frequency it can't identify. "I want to try something tonight," he said. "After my show's over. Will you stay up with me for a bit?" I said sure. I asked what he wanted to try. "I want to talk to it," he said. "I want to see if it's actually reacting to us, or if it's random." I remember feeling 2 things simultaneously. The intellectual certainty that this was silly, and a deeper, less rational reluctance that I chose to ignore. "Okay," I said. "But Lisa's going to tell you it's a ground loop." "Maybe," he said. "But ground loops don't pulse in patterns." He was right about that. That night, after Darren's show ended at 11 and the automation kicked in, we sat together in the control room with the monitor speaker turned up and the overhead lights off. Darren had a notepad. I had my phone recording audio, though I'd later wish I hadn't lost that file when my phone died in November. "Okay," Darren said, his voice low even though no one could hear us. We weren't on air. The automation was running a block of soft rock, Fleetwood Mac, I think, or maybe it was Steely Dan. The tone was there beneath it, steady and low. "I'm gonna say something," Darren said, "and we're gonna see if anything changes." He cleared his throat. "My name is Darren," he said in his DJ voice, clear, projected, warm. "I work at this station. Can you hear me?" Nothing. The tone held steady. We waited 30 seconds. A minute. "Maybe it's..." I started. The tone pulsed. A single, unmistakable rise and fall. We stared at each other. My mouth had gone dry in a way that felt sudden and complete, like someone had turned off a faucet. "Was that..." Darren whispered. "It could be coincidental," I said, but my voice sounded wrong. Too thin. Darren swallowed. He leaned closer to the speaker, though that made no rational sense. The speaker was output, not input. There was no microphone picking us up. The control room mics were off. The board was set to automation. Whatever was happening with this signal, it wasn't hearing us through any equipment we understood. "Can you hear me?" Darren asked again. Pulse. One pulse. Definite. Clear. "Is that a yes?" he asked. Pulse. "Can you do 2 for no?" Silence. The tone held flat. Then, after maybe 10 seconds, pulse. Pulse. Darren wrote something on his notepad. I could see his hand shaking. I want to be clear about something. Darren was not a credulous person. He didn't believe in ghosts. He thought horoscopes were stupid. He was a pragmatist from a family of farmers. Whatever was happening despite his worldview, not because of it. "Okay," he said. He was speaking quietly now, and I noticed he'd angled his body slightly away from the monitor speaker, like someone positioning themselves near an exit. "What are you?" No pulse. The tone held steady. Seconds passed. Then it modulated. Not in pulses, but in a slow, wavering pattern. Up, down, almost like speech cadence, but with no words. Just pitch variation. "I don't understand that," Darren said. The tone went flat again. We sat in silence for what felt like a long time. The automation played Hotel California, which would have been funny if either of us had been in a laughing mood. Finally, Darren said, "I think that's enough for tonight." He stood up, gathered his things. At the door, he turned back to me. "Don't tell Pete about this yet. He'll think we're screwing around. Let me think about it." I nodded. After he left, I turned the monitor speaker down to its lowest setting. The tone was still there, barely audible, but present, like breath. Over the next week, Darren became increasingly preoccupied. He wasn't sleeping well. His wife called the station one afternoon while I was coming in early, and I overheard Lisa telling her that Darren seemed fine, just busy, but he didn't seem fine. His show was still good. Darren was a professional, and his on-air voice never wavered. But in the gaps, during commercial breaks, when he thought no one was watching, he'd sit very still and stare at the monitor speaker with an expression I can only describe as concentration, like he was trying to hear something that was just below the threshold of perception. He started staying later again after his shift. Not to chat with me, to talk to the signal. He'd sit in the control room after 11 and conduct what amounted to interviews with something we couldn't see, couldn't identify, and couldn't explain. I was there for most of them. Part of me was fascinated. Part of me was increasingly uneasy, and I couldn't articulate why. The entity, I don't know what else to call it, communicated primarily through the pulse system. 1 for yes, 2 for no, but over time it developed more complex patterns. 3 rapid pulses seemed to indicate excitement or agreement. A long, sustained rise in pitch seemed to convey something like dissatisfaction or agitation. And occasionally it would produce that wavering, speech-like modulation that neither of us could decode. Darren asked it questions every night. Basic things at first. "Are you alive?" 1 pulse. "Are you human?" 2 pulses. "Were you ever human?" A long pause, then 1 pulse. "Are you dead?" Another long pause. Then a pattern we hadn't heard before. 1 pulse, then 2, then 1 again. We didn't know what that meant. "Maybe it doesn't know," I said. Darren wrote that down. "Here's what I need you to understand about this period." It felt controlled. Scientific, almost. Darren was approaching it like a journalist with a source. Careful. Methodical. He kept detailed notes. He wasn't frightened. Not visibly. He was engaged. And because he wasn't frightened, I wasn't either. Not yet. But something was shifting. I noticed it in small ways first. The tone was getting louder. Not dramatically. If I hadn't been listening for it specifically, I might not have noticed. But week over week, it was growing. By early October, you could hear it clearly beneath the broadcast audio without turning up the monitor. It was also present during the day now. Pete mentioned it once. "Is there a hum on the line? Checked the grounding at the tower, and Lisa spent a Saturday afternoon inspecting every connection between the studio and the transmitter. She found nothing wrong." The other thing I noticed was that the signal seemed to be aware of conversations it shouldn't have been able to hear. Not just when we spoke directly to it in the control room. That was strange enough. But private conversations. Things said in the break room, in the parking lot, in the hallway. The first time I was certain of this was October 8th. I'd been in the break room, a separate room, down the hall from the control room with the door closed, talking on my phone to my mother. She'd been asking about my girlfriend, Sarah, and I'd told her we'd broken up 2 weeks earlier. I hadn't told anyone at the station yet. It wasn't dramatic. Sarah and I had just drifted apart, but it was private. I said to my mother, "I think I'm going to be alone for a while," and hung up. That night, during one of Darren's sessions, the signal did something new. Without being asked anything, it pulsed, then modulated, then pulsed again. A pattern. Darren and I looked at each other. "What is it?" Darren asked. The wavering modulation came again. And then, and I know how this sounds, the tone shaped itself into something almost linguistic. Not words. Not quite, but rhythm, cadence, emphasis. Like someone speaking through a wall of water. "I can't understand you," Darren said. "I'm sorry. Silence." Then, very slowly, the tone pulsed. A long pause. Pulsed again. Long pause. Then modulated with a rising inflection. "Are you asking a question?" I asked. 1 pulse. "Yes." "About one of us?" 1 pulse. Darren looked at me. "About Marcus?" 1 pulse. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What about me?" I said. My voice came out wrong. The tone modulated. That rising, wavering quality. And within it, buried deep like a shape beneath ice, I heard something. Not clearly. Not in a way I could transcribe. But I heard it, and what I heard was the word alone. I didn't say anything. Darren looked at me. "What did it say?" "I think it said alone," I whispered. We sat with that for a moment. The control room felt smaller than it had before. Darker. The monitor speaker hummed its low, continuous note. How did you know about that? I asked the signal. I was in the break room. The door was closed. No response. The tone held flat and steady, as though nothing had happened. I want to describe what the control room felt like during this period, because I think it matters for understanding what happened later. It was a small room, maybe 12 by 14 feet, with acoustic foam on the walls and a drop ceiling that had water stains in 2 corners. The main broadcast console took up one wall, a big old analog board with faders and meters, and a routing matrix that Lisa was the only one who fully understood. There were 2 monitor speakers, but only the left one carried the broadcast feed. The right one had blown years ago and never been replaced. There was one window, but it faced the field, and at night there was nothing to see through it but your own reflection against the dark. The overhead fluorescent had a tendency to flicker, so I usually left it off and worked by the glow of the board meters and a small desk lamp. The room smelled like old coffee, electronic heat, and something faintly agricultural. The soybean field's particular autumn scent of decay and readiness that seeped in through the building's poor insulation. At night, the building was full of the sounds that old structures make. Settling, ticking, the HVAC cycling on and off, and beneath all of it, always the tone. I started dreading the shift. Not because anything had happened that I could point to and say, "This is dangerous. I should leave." It was more insidious than that. It was the feeling of being listened to. Of every word you said, every word you even thought about saying, being received by something you couldn't see. I became hyper-aware of my own voice. I'd catch myself about to mutter something, to narrate my actions the way people do when they're alone, and I'd stop, bite it back, because I didn't know what it would hear, what it would know. Darren didn't seem to share this anxiety. If anything, he was moving in the opposite direction. His sessions with the signal grew longer, sometimes lasting until 2 or 3 in the morning. He started bringing a small cassette recorder to capture the tone's modulations, though on playback they were always frustratingly ambiguous. What had sounded like almost words in the moment sounded like nothing on tape, just variations and a hum. "It's real time," Darren said when I pointed this out. "It's not something that records. It's something that's happening. Present tense." I asked him what he thought it was. He was quiet for a long time. "I think it's been here a long time," he said. "I think it's been in the signal for years, maybe decades, and nobody noticed because nobody was listening. Not really listening. Everyone just heard the tone and wrote it off as interference." He paused. "I think it's lonely." The word hit me strangely. Not because it was wrong, but because it was too simple. Too human an emotion to project onto something that might not be human at all. "You don't know that," I said. "No," he agreed. "But it knew about you. About Sarah. It heard you say you were going to be alone, and it reacted to that. It recognized it." He looked at me with that intensity he'd developed. "That's empathy, Marcus. Or something like it." I wanted to argue with him, but I couldn't. He was right that the signal had demonstrated knowledge it shouldn't have had. He was right that it seemed to respond more actively to emotional content than to neutral questions. When Darren asked technical questions, "What frequency are you transmitting on?" or "How long have you been here?" the responses were muted, ambiguous. But when the conversation turned to something human, fear, loneliness, desire, grief, the tone would come alive, pulsing, modulating, wavering with what seemed like eagerness. It liked us talking about ourselves, about our feelings, about the private interior architecture of our lives. I didn't like that. October 18th, Lisa was in the building that night, running some maintenance on the automation computer. She'd been in the control room earlier, but was now in the back office working on the server. Darren and I were in the control room. He'd been talking to the signal for about an hour, asking it questions about its nature, its origin. The responses had been vague, 1 pulse, 2 pulses, the occasional modulation that never quite coalesced into anything decipherable. Then Darren said something that changed things. He'd been quiet for a minute, just staring at the console, and then he said, "I'm tired. I don't mean sleepy. I mean tired. Of this, of all of it. The money stuff, the worrying, the feeling like I'm running in place. Sometimes I think about just stopping, you know? Just stopping everything." He wasn't talking to the signal. He was talking to me. Or maybe to himself. It was the kind of thing a man says at 1 a.m. when he's exhausted and doesn't have the energy to maintain his walls anymore. I don't think he meant anything by it beyond fatigue and frustration. But the signal responded, not with a pulse, not with modulation, with a voice. It came through the monitor speaker, and it was clear. Not crystal clear. It sounded like it was coming from very far away or through a medium that distorted it, like speaking into a fan. But it was unmistakably a voice, and it said a word. The word was, "Yes." 1 syllable, stretched slightly, like a recording played at 90% speed. But human sounding. Intimate. Close. Darren went white. I saw the color leave his face in real time, draining downward like water through sand. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. We sat there frozen, staring at the speaker, and the tone resumed its usual drone as though nothing had happened. After a full minute of silence, Darren said very quietly, "Did you hear that?" "Yes," I said. "It said yes." "I know." It was agreeing with me. His voice was barely above a whisper. I said I wanted to stop everything, and it said yes. "Darren, you need to..." "Why would it say that?" He was looking at me now, and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Not fear, recognition. Like he just realized something that had been true for a long time. Why would it want me to stop? I didn't have an answer. The broadcast played on some old Bobby Darin song that felt obscenely cheerful in the context. The tone hummed. Darren gathered his things slowly, mechanically, and left without another word. Lisa came in from the back office about 10 minutes later, holding a mug of tea and looking at her phone. She glanced at me and stopped. "You look terrible," she said. "The signal talked," I said. She stared at me, set down her mug. "What do you mean, talked?" I told her. "Everything, the pulses, the responses to our conversations, the knowledge of things said off air, and now the voice." She listened without interrupting, her expression moving from skepticism to confusion to something more careful. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Play me the tone," she said. I turned up the monitor. The tone was there, steady. Lisa leaned close to the speaker, listening with her engineer's ear, tilting her head slightly. After about 30 seconds, she straightened up. "That shouldn't be there," she said. "It's not on any of our frequencies. It's not harmonic interference. It's..." She trailed off, listening again. "It sounds like it's in the carrier wave itself. Like something's modulating the carrier independently of our broadcast signal." "What could do that?" "Nothing," she said. "Nothing I know of. Not without access to the transmitter hardware." She looked at me. "Has anyone been out to the tower?" "Not since you checked it 2 weeks ago." "I'm going out there tomorrow," she said. First thing. She did go out to the tower the next day. She found nothing wrong. Every connection was clean, every component reading normal. The tower itself, a 200-foot guide structure about half a mile from the studio in the middle of the soybean field, was exactly as it should have been. She told Pete there might be an atmospheric issue, some kind of skywave interference pattern. Pete nodded and said to keep an eye on it. Meanwhile, Darren missed his shift that evening. Just didn't come in. No call, no message. Pete was irritated and ran the automation through the evening block. Darren called the next morning and said he'd been sick. Stomach bug! But when he came back the following evening, he looked like he'd aged a year. There were shadows under his eyes that I don't think sleep alone could have put there. He didn't stay after his shift that night, or the next night, or the next. For almost a week, he handed off to me right at 11 and left immediately. We barely spoke. I thought maybe the voice had scared him away, that he'd decided the whole thing was too strange and was pulling back. I hoped that was it. October 26th. I was alone in the control room at about 2:30 in the morning. The broadcast was running. The tone was there, steady, a bit louder than it had been the week before. I'd been silent for hours, deliberately, not speaking, not muttering, not giving it anything to work with. But that night, it didn't need my voice. The tone modulated on its own, shifted into that wavering, speech-like pattern, and then the voice came again. Clearer this time, less distorted, like whatever was producing it had practiced. It said, "He's thinking about it." 3 words, perfectly audible, and then silence. I sat very still. My heartbeat was so loud in my ears that it seemed impossible the microphones wouldn't pick it up, though they were off. He's thinking about it. Who was he? What was it? But I knew. I think I knew immediately, even as I tried to convince myself I didn't. Darren, in the control room, a week ago, saying he wanted to stop everything. The signal saying, yes. And now... He's thinking about it. I pulled out my phone and called Darren. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted him. Call me when you get this. It's important. I stared at the phone, stared at the speaker. The tone hummed flat and steady, as if nothing had happened. At 6 a.m., when my shift ended, I drove to Darren's house. It was a small ranch on the north side of Carriston, white siding, chain-link fence, a basketball hoop in the driveway that hadn't been used in years. I sat in my car for a few minutes, feeling ridiculous. What was I going to say? A radio signal told me you're suicidal? He'd think I was insane. Maybe I was insane. I went home instead. Slept badly. Called him in the afternoon. He answered this time. Sounded tired, but normal. Hey, what's up? He said. Just checking in. I said. You seemed off last week. Yeah. A pause. How's the signal still doing its thing? It talked again last night, I said. Silence on the line. What did it say? He asked, and his voice was carefully neutral. I hesitated. It said, he's thinking about it. More silence. Longer this time. Darren? I'm here. His voice was different now. Quieter. Did it say anything else? No. That's all. Okay. Another pause. Listen, I gotta go. Emily needs help with something. I'll see you tonight. He hung up. I stared at the phone. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong, but I didn't know what to do about it. What's the protocol for this? There isn't one. There's no manual for what to do when an unexplained phenomenon tells you your friend is in danger. That night, October 26th, Darren came in for his shift. He was early. He found me in the break room eating a sandwich and sat down across from me with the deliberate posture of someone who's prepared a speech. I need to tell you something, he said, and I need you not to freak out. Oh. I've been hearing it at home. I stopped chewing. The tone, he said. Not through a radio, not through any device, just in the air. At night, mostly, when the house is quiet. It's faint, but it's there. And Marcus. He leaned forward. His eyes were red-rimmed, and I could see the broken capillaries in the whites. It talks to me. Not in words, exactly. More like it puts things in my head. Ideas. Feelings. It's like having a thought that isn't yours, but you can't tell the difference until after you've already had it. What kind of thoughts? He didn't answer right away. He looked at the table, at his hands. They were large hands, a working man's hands, and they were trembling. Ending things, he said quietly. Not violently, just quietly, like going to sleep and not waking up. It makes it sound peaceful, easy, like it would be a relief. Darren, I know what it sounds like, he said. I know, but I'm not depressed, Marcus. I've been tired, sure, stressed about money, but I wasn't thinking about that before. Not until... He gestured vaguely. A motion that encompassed the building, the signal, everything. Not until it started talking back. I felt sick. A low, spreading nausea that had nothing to do with food. You need to stop talking to it. We both need to stop. And you need to... Darren, you need to talk to someone. A professional. I'm not suicidal, he said firmly. These aren't my thoughts. I can tell the difference. I'm telling you because I want you to understand what this thing is doing. It's not lonely, Marcus. It's not reaching out for connection. He looked at me with a terrible clarity. It's pushing. It found something in me, some crack, some vulnerability, and it's pushing on it. It wants something from me, something specific. What? I think it wants me to die. The fluorescent overhead buzzed. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the hall, the automation system played a commercial for a tire shop in Xenia. Everything was so normal, so mundane, that Darren's words seemed to exist in a different reality entirely, one that had been laid over the ordinary world like a transparency. Then we stop, I said. We're done with this. I'll tell Pete about the interference. He'll call an engineer. They'll track down whatever this is. It's not interference, Darren said. You know it's not. I don't care what it is. We're done engaging with it. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, he said. You're right. We're done. But he didn't look like someone who believed that was possible. Here's what I didn't tell Darren. That same night, after he left, and I was alone in the control room, the signal spoke again, unprompted. It said, in that voice that sounded like it was traveling through miles of dark water to reach me, he can't stop hearing me. And then, after a pause, neither will you. I turned off the monitor speaker, physically flipped it off at the power switch on the back of the unit. The tones stopped. The room was silent except for the broadcast running through my headphones, the automation playing its endless rotation. I sat in that silence and I was more afraid than I have ever been in my life. Not because of what the signal had said, though that was bad enough, but because even with the speaker off, even with no audio pathway for the signal to reach me, I could still feel it. A presence. A pressure. Like someone standing just behind me, breathing on the back of my neck, not quite touching. I didn't turn the speaker back on. I sat in silence until 6 a.m., watching the meters on the board bounce with the music I couldn't hear, and when my shift was over, I walked to my car in the gray pre-dawn light and sat behind the wheel for 10 minutes before I could make my hands steady enough to drive. The next few days exist in my memory as a kind of blur. I told Lisa everything. She listened. She didn't dismiss me. Lisa wasn't the type to dismiss things, but she was practical where I was panicked. Something is generating that signal, she said. Something physical. It has to be. Even if we don't understand how it's responding to us, it's coming through hardware, which means it can be blocked. She spent the better part of a day going through the signal chain. She disconnected and reconnected every piece of equipment between the studio and the transmitter. She tested frequencies, measured waveforms, ran diagnostics, and she found something. There's a carrier wave within the carrier wave, she told me, sitting in the control room with a spectrum analyzer open on her laptop. She pointed to a narrow spike on the display. See that? That's not us. That's riding on our signal, but it's independent. It's being injected somewhere between the audio chain and the transmitter output. Injected how? I don't know. It's not coming from any equipment in this building. I've disconnected everything and it persists. It's either at the tower itself or it's being broadcast by something close enough to our antenna to couple with it. So it's someone else's signal? Someone's piggybacking on our frequency? She hesitated. That's the most rational explanation, yes. But Marcus, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen interference that responds to human speech. That's not how electromagnetic radiation works. Maybe there's a microphone somewhere. A bug. I swept for that. There's nothing. We sat with that for a moment. The analyzer displayed its spike, steady, unwavering. A signal within our signal. A parasite riding the carrier wave. I want to try something, Lisa said. I want to cut power to the transmitter, just for a few minutes. If the signal disappears, it needs our hardware to exist. If it doesn't, she trailed off. We cut the transmitter at 3 a.m. on October 30th. Technically a violation. You're supposed to notify the FCC of any unscheduled outage. But Lisa didn't care, and neither did I. She killed the power remotely from the control room. The broadcast went dead. The monitor speaker went silent, but the tone didn't stop. It was quieter, much quieter. But it was still there, coming from the monitor speaker despite the fact that there was no signal being received. The speaker should have been producing nothing but silence. Instead, there was the tone. Faint, steady, present. Lisa's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, denial, recalculation, and finally something that might have been fear, though she masked it quickly. "That's not possible," she said. "I know." She got up and physically disconnected the monitor speaker from the wall, pulling the cable from the back of the unit. The tone stopped. Silence. Real silence. She stood there holding the cable, staring at the speaker. "It was in the speaker itself," she said. "Not in the signal, in the hardware." She looked at me. "How is it in the hardware?" I didn't know. I don't know now. But here's what I've come to believe. Whatever the signal was, it wasn't really a signal at all. A signal is something that travels between 2 points. This was something that inhabited things. It had started in the carrier wave, or we'd first noticed it there. But it wasn't limited to it. It could move into hardware. It could move into the air if Darren was right about hearing it at home. And maybe, this is the thought that still keeps me awake, it could move into people. Into the cracks between thoughts, the spaces where a person's defenses were thinnest. The vulnerable places. October 31st. Halloween. Darren didn't come in for his shift. Pete was angry this time. It was the second no-show in a month, and Pete wasn't a patient man. He tried calling Darren, got no answer, left a voicemail that was professional but clipped. I offered to cover the evening shift, and Pete accepted. I tried Darren too. Nothing. Texted him. Nothing. I called his wife, Karen, and she picked up on the second ring. "Marcus, hi," she said. She sounded tired. "He's here. He's in bed. He's been in bed all day. I don't think he slept last night. Is he okay?" A pause. "I don't know. He won't really talk to me. He just keeps saying he's tired." Another pause. Longer. "Has something been going on at the station?" He's been different these past few weeks. Distant. Distracted. He keeps asking me if I hear things. I told her I'd come check on him after my shift. She said okay. I ran the evening show on automation. Didn't trust myself to go live, and then did my own overnight as well. A double. 16 hours in that building. I left the monitor speaker disconnected. I wore headphones and played the broadcast at a volume too loud to hear anything else. I did not speak out loud. Not once. Not a single word. I made it through the night. The next morning, November 1st, I drove to Darren's house. Karen met me at the door. She looked like she'd been crying. "He's in the basement," she said. "He went down there last night and won't come up. Says it's quieter down there." She clutched her own arms, holding herself. "Marcus, should I call someone? A doctor? He's scaring me." "Yes," I said. "Call his doctor today." I went down to the basement. It was half finished. Concrete floor, exposed joists, a couch and a TV on one side, storage shelves on the other. Darren was on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, staring at the wall. Not the TV, the wall. "Darren," he looked at me. His eyes were sunken, and there was a quality to his gaze that I can only describe as thin. Like there was less of him behind his eyes than there should have been. "It's louder at night," he said without preamble. "I can hear it everywhere upstairs. Down here it's muffled, but still there. You need to see a doctor," I said, sitting on the edge of the couch. "Today, Karen's going to call. A doctor can't hear it, Marcus." He almost smiled. "A doctor's going to think I'm having a breakdown. Maybe you are." "I'm not." He said it with the flat certainty of someone who's considered and rejected that possibility. "You heard it too. Lisa heard it. This isn't in my head. It's in everything. It's in the wiring of this house. It's in the pipes, the ductwork, anything metal, anything that can carry a vibration." He closed his eyes. "It talks to me constantly now, not in words anymore, more like feelings, impressions. It shows me what it would be like, how easy it would be, how quiet." Darren listened to me. "I'm not going to do it," he said, opening his eyes. "I want you to know that. I'm not. But it's getting harder to hold on to why. That's what it does. It doesn't push you. It erodes you, like water on rock. It takes away your reasons one by one until the only thing left is the suggestion." He looked at me with those thin eyes. "I think it's been doing this to people for a long time, Marcus. I think we're not the first." I stayed with him for an hour. Karen called the family doctor who couldn't see him until Monday. I asked if there was a crisis line, and Karen said she'd look into it. Darren seemed calm, tired, but calm, aware of what was happening to him, resistant to it. I believed him when he said he wasn't going to do it. I believed him because I needed to believe him. I went back to the station that afternoon. Lisa was there, in the control room with her laptop open and a look on her face that I'd never seen before. She waved me over without speaking and pointed at her screen. It was a database. FCC records. She'd been searching for complaints filed about WKRL frequency over the years, interference reports, signal issues, anything unusual. "Look at this," she said. She pointed to an entry from 2003, a complaint from a listener about a persistent humming sound beneath the broadcast. And another from 1997, same description. And 1991, and 1984. "It goes back decades," she said. "Every few years someone notices the tone, always the same description, always dismissed as atmospheric interference or equipment issues. Okay, but that's not the interesting part." She opened another tab. A local newspaper archive. An obituary. "This is Roger Whitfield. He was the overnight operator at WKRL from 1982 to 1984. He died in December of '84, suicide." She opened another tab, another obituary. "Ann Castro, part-time overnight host, 1996 to 1998. Died January 1998. She looked at me. Suicide. Another tab. James Fenton, overnight board operator, 2002 to 2003. Died November 2003. She didn't need to say it. I could see the word in the obituary. Survived by 3 overnight operators in 20 years, Lisa said. All dead by their own hand. All within a year or two of those interference complaints showing up in the FCC records. The room felt like it was tilting. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a ship taking on water. It cycles, I said. That's what I think. It lies dormant. Maybe for years. And then it activates. Finds someone. Someone who's there at night when it's strongest. Someone who talks. Who's alone. She looked at me. Someone vulnerable. Darren, I said. Darren, she agreed. What do we do? Lisa closed her laptop with a precise, deliberate motion. We shut the station down. We go to Pete. We tell him everything, and we shut it down. The tower, the transmitter, all of it. He won't believe us. Then we lie. We tell him there's a structural issue with the tower, a safety concern, an FCC violation. I don't care. Whatever gets it off the air. It wasn't on the air when you killed the transmitter, I reminded her. It was still in the speaker. She was quiet for a moment. Then we destroy the equipment. Lisa... I'm serious. Whatever it's living in, we destroy. The speakers, the transmitter, the antenna, every piece of hardware in this building if we have to. And if it's not in the hardware anymore, if it's in Darren's house, in his walls... She didn't have an answer for that. We went to Pete. We didn't tell him about the entity. Lisa was right that he wouldn't believe us. Instead, Lisa manufactured a concern about the tower's structural integrity, citing some readings she'd taken that suggested metal fatigue in one of the guy wire anchors. She recommended taking the transmitter offline for at least a week while a structural engineer assessed the situation. Pete was unhappy. Taking WKRL off the air meant lost revenue. Not much revenue, given the station's size, but enough to matter to a small market operation running on thin margins. But he trusted Lisa. She'd kept that station running for years, and she didn't raise alarms lightly. He agreed to take the transmitter offline starting November 4th. November 4th, a Monday. Lisa killed the transmitter at midnight. I was in the control room when she did it. The broadcast stopped. The monitors went silent. And for the first time in almost 2 months, the building felt empty. Truly empty. Not just quiet. Vacant. The tone was gone. I sat in that silence and waited to feel relief. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a sick certainty that we'd done something wrong. Not morally wrong. Strategically wrong. Like we'd blocked one exit and whatever was in the building had simply found another. I drove to Darren's house at 1 a.m. I know that's strange. It's a strange thing to do. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I parked on the street and looked at the house. Dark windows. A porch light on, the kind that runs on a timer. Everything looked normal. I sat in the car for 20 minutes, watching. Nothing moved. Finally, I started the engine and drove home. Darren came back to work on November 5th. Without the transmitter running, there was technically nothing to do, but Pete wanted bodies in the building in case the engineer needed access. Darren looked better. Not good, but better. The hollowness was still there, but less pronounced. He told me he'd slept the previous night. Really slept. For the first time in weeks. It stopped, he said, when we were alone in the break room. When you killed the transmitter, I felt it go, like a pressure releasing. He rubbed his temples. Jesus, Marcus. I didn't realize how loud it was until it was gone. How do you feel now? Like myself, he said, and he almost smiled. Like myself again. I wanted to believe it was over. For 2 days, I did believe it. Lisa scheduled the structural assessment for the following week. Darren came in, drank coffee, laughed at things. He called his daughter and talked about college plans with something approaching his old enthusiasm. The color came back to his face. He slept. On November 7th, a Thursday, I came into the station at my usual time, about 10:30 p.m., and found the control room door closed. I could hear something through it. Faint. Rhythmic. Familiar. I opened the door. The monitor speaker was on. It shouldn't have been... I'd left it disconnected, and the transmitter was still offline. But it was on. The power light glowed red, and coming from it was the tone. Not quiet. Not faint. Loud. Louder than I had ever heard it. A deep, resonant hum that I could feel in my chest, in my teeth, in the architecture of my bones. And modulating. Not in the simple pulse patterns of before, but in long, complex phrases of pitch variation that sounded unmistakably like speech. Like someone giving a sermon in a language I almost understood. I crossed the room in 2 steps and yanked the power cable from the speaker. The sound stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, ringing, painful. I looked at the cable in my hand. It was plugged into nothing. There was no connection between the speaker and the wall. The cable I'd pulled was the power cord, the only cord, and it had been hanging loose behind the unit. The speaker had not been plugged in. I stood there holding that cable, and I think that's the closest I've ever come to a genuine psychological break. Not because it was the most frightening thing that happened. It wasn't, not by a long margin, but because it violated something fundamental. A speaker without power cannot produce sound. That is not a matter of opinion or interpretation. It is a fact of electrical engineering. And yet... I left the building. I got in my car. I called Lisa and told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a long time. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. When she arrived, we went back into the control room together. The speaker was silent. Dead. Inert. Lisa examined it with a flashlight. The cone, the magnet, the voice coil. She tested it with a multimeter. There was no stored charge, no residual energy, nothing that could account for what I'd heard. "I believe you," she said simply. "And then, we need to get rid of it. Not just unplug it, destroy it." She took the speaker outside and put it in the trunk of her car. I don't know what she did with it later. Smashed it, I think, though she never told me directly. When she came back inside, she walked through the entire building, checking every speaker, every piece of hardware capable of producing audio. She found nothing. "What about Darren?" I asked. "Call him." I called him. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. I called Karen. No answer. I texted Darren. "Please call me immediately." It was after midnight now. Lisa and I sat in the control room, now stripped of its monitor speakers, eerily quiet, and waited. At 12:30, my phone rang. It was Darren. "Hey," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that exists on the other side of a decision. "Darren, where are you?" "I'm at the tower." My blood went cold. The tower. Half a mile away in the middle of the soybean field. 200 feet of steel in the darkness. "Why are you at the tower?" My voice was shaking. Lisa was watching my face, reading the alarm there. She was already putting on her jacket. "I can hear it here," Darren said. "Even with the transmitter off. It's in the metal, in the structure itself. It's been in the tower this whole time. Marcus. We were wrong, it's not in the signal. The tower is the signal. It's been broadcasting through everything that connects to it. The wires, the ground, the air. Darren, please come down. We're coming to get you. I'm not going to hurt myself," he said. "I just needed to hear it clearly. Without interference. It's different here. It's not telling me to die anymore. It's..." He paused. In the silence, I thought I could hear something in the background of the call. A low, steady hum, the tone, transmitted through his phone's microphone, picked up from the air around the tower. It's telling me something else now.
What is it telling you?
It's telling me it wants to come in. Come in where? In, he said. Just that. In. Lisa was already at the door. Let's go, she said. I kept the phone to my ear as we ran to her car. The night was cold, clear, moonless. We drove the half-mile to the tower access road, a rutted gravel track between the field rows, and I could see the tower's red obstruction lights blinking in the darkness. As we got closer, I could make out a shape at the tower's base. A car, Darren's car, and a figure standing near the base of the tower, one hand resting on the metal lattice. We pulled up and Lisa killed the engine. In the sudden silence, I could hear it. The tone, not from a speaker, not from a phone, from the air itself, from the tower. A deep harmonic resonance that the metal structure was producing, vibrating at some frequency that made the air around it thick and heavy. Darren, I called, getting out of the car. He turned to look at me. He was still holding his phone. In the red blink of the obstruction lights, I could see his face. Calm, open, curious, not afraid, not in distress. He looked like someone listening to beautiful music. Can you hear it? He asked as we approached. It's not malicious, Marcus. I was wrong about that. It's just large and old, and it wants to be somewhere. It's been trapped in this metal for so long. Step away from the tower, Lisa said. Her voice was firm, professional, the voice of someone used to giving instructions in technical emergencies. Darren, step away from it. Now. He looked at her, then back at the tower. His hand was still on the lattice, and I noticed that his fingers were wrapped around one of the structural members with a grip that seemed involuntary, white-knuckled, like he was holding on to something, or something was holding on to him. I don't think I can, he said, and for the first time I heard fear in his voice. I don't think it's going to let me. The tone surged. It rose in pitch and volume, not gradually but suddenly, like someone had turned a dial all the way to the right. The sound was physical. I felt it in my sinuses, in my jaw, behind my eyes. Lisa grabbed my arm and pulled me back a step. Darren's mouth opened, but whatever he said was drowned by the sound. And then his hand let go of the tower. He stumbled backward, 2 steps, 3, and fell to his knees in the dirt. The tone cut off. Not gradually. Instantly. Like a switch. The night was silent. Just the wind and the soybean stubble, the distant hum of a highway. Darren was on his hands and knees, breathing hard. Lisa and I reached him at the same time. His skin was cold to the touch, and he was shaking violently. Full-body tremors that made his teeth chatter. But he was alive. He was himself. It let go, he whispered. Here. Let go. We took Darren to the hospital that night. Not the emergency room. The psychiatric unit. He went voluntarily. He told the intake nurse he'd been having intrusive thoughts of self-harm and was worried about his safety. They admitted him for observation. Karen came. Their daughter drove in from Columbus the next morning. Lisa called Pete from the hospital parking lot at 4 a.m. and told him the tower needed to come down, not repair. Removal. She cited structural concerns, FCC compliance issues, potential liability. Pete resisted. A new tower would cost money the station didn't have. Lisa told him she would resign immediately and report the structural issues to the county if he didn't act. She was bluffing about some of it, not all. Pete agreed to decommission the tower. It took 2 weeks. Permits, contractors, logistics. During those 2 weeks, the station was off the air. During those 2 weeks, Darren was in the hospital. and during those 2 weeks, I didn't set foot in the building. The tower came down on November 22nd. Lisa was there to watch. She told me later that when the structure hit the ground, she felt something change in the air. Not a sound, the absence of one. A pressure she hadn't realized was there, releasing. Like a held breath finally exhaled. Darren was released on November 25th. He never went back to WKRL. Neither did I. Pete shut the station down permanently in January 2020, couldn't afford a new tower, and the revenue couldn't justify the investment. The building was sold. Last I heard, it's a storage facility now. Darren is alive. I want to be clear about that. He's alive, and as far as I know, he's okay. He moved his family to Columbus to be near his daughter. He doesn't work in radio anymore. He manages a hardware store. He told me the last time we spoke that he can still feel it sometimes, a faint pressure, like the memory of a sound, but it doesn't speak to him. It doesn't push. It's like a scar, present, but healed. Here's what I haven't told you yet. The thing I've been building toward. The reason I finally wrote this down. 3 weeks ago, I was driving through a town in rural Indiana, not Carriston, nowhere near Carriston, a different state entirely, and I passed a radio tower. A 200-foot guide structure in the middle of a field, just like ours. And as I passed it, my car radio, tuned to nothing, just static between stations, produced a sound, a tone, low, steady, familiar. I turned the radio off. The sound stopped. I kept driving. My hands were steady. I didn't pull over. I didn't investigate. I just drove. But I want you to know this. For just a moment, before I turned the dial, the tone modulated. It wavered. It rose and fell in that speech-like cadence that I will recognize until the day I die. And I could almost make out a word. I didn't listen. I won't listen. I will never listen again. But it's still out there. In the metal. In the wires. In the spaces between stations, the dead air, the unattended frequencies. It's old, and it's patient, and it's waiting for someone to talk back. If you work overnights at a radio station, anywhere, and you hear a tone beneath the broadcast that shouldn't be there, don't speak. Don't acknowledge it. Don't stay. Get up. Walk out. Drive away. And don't look back. Some things don't need a response. Some things only need you to listen once.